My name is Eleanor Matthews, though everyone calls me Ellie. I'm 68 years old, a retired school principal from Salt Lake City, Utah, and 18 months ago, I became a widow. I thought losing my husband, Henry, would be the hardest thing I'd ever face. But I was wrong, because what came after his death was something I never imagined. Discovering that the man I shared 45 years with had quietly built a fortune worth $53 million. When Henry passed, the world went silent. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the grandfather clock in the hall, every sound was an accusation of his absence. He'd been my anchor, my quiet, steady hand for nearly 5 decades. For weeks, I moved through our small, clapboard house on Elm Street like a ghost, unable to face the sealed door of his study. He'd been a history professor, for heaven's sake. A man who found more joy in a first-edition Churchill biography than a new car. The discovery of his fortune felt like a posthumous earthquake, shattering the very foundation of the life I thought we'd built. It was his lawyer, a sharp, kind-eyed woman named Grace Lambert, who delivered the news 2 months after the funeral. She slid a single sheet of paper across her polished desk. "Henry was a very private man, Mrs. Matthews," she said, her voice gentle, and a very astute one. "Over the years, he made a series of early investments in companies you've probably never heard of. Tech, biotech, they paid off beyond anyone's imagination. The total valuation of the estate is approximately $53 million. The air left my lungs. 53 million. The number was so vast it was meaningless, an abstract concept that refused to coalesce into reality. "That can't be right," I whispered, my voice thin. "Henry, we lived on a teacher's salary." We clipped coupons. "We worried about the cost of a new water heater." Grace offered a soft, understanding smile. "He told me once that he never wanted the money to define you. He said, 'Ellie's happiness is in her garden and her books. I won't let a string of zeros cast a shadow on that.' He set up everything in a series of trusts. You have full control. The money is yours, Ellie." I drove home in a daze, the familiar streets of Salt Lake City looking alien and strange. That night, I finally opened his study. The room smelled of old paper, lemon polish, and him. On his desk, next to a faded photo of us on our honeymoon at Lake Powell, was a sealed envelope with my name on it, written in his familiar looping script, "My dearest Ellie. If you're reading this, then I've gone on ahead. I'm sorry for the shock I'm sure Grace has just given you. Please don't be angry. I never kept this from you out of deceit, but out of protection. I saw what money did to my own family, the greed, the jealousy, the constant quiet war behind smiling faces. I never wanted that for us. For you, this money is not a reward for a life well lived. Our life together was its own reward. It is a tool. Use it to secure your peace. Use it to find joy. Use it, if you wish, to do the quiet, unseen good in the world that you've always been so good at. But above all, my love, be careful. Never let wealth decide who you trust. The world is full of people who see a dollar sign before they see a soul. Yours, always and forever." Henry, tears streamed down my face, hot and silent. He hadn't lied. He had loved me. He had built a fortress of silence around our happiness. And in his warning, I heard the echo of his profound wisdom. I made a decision then, sitting in the worn leather of his chair. I would honor his wish. I would not change my life. The world would continue to see Eleanor Matthews, the retired school teacher on a fixed income, living in her modest house, driving her 10-year-old Volvo. I didn't realize it then, but that decision to wear my poverty like a cloak would become my greatest weapon. It would protect far more than money. It would protect my family's very soul. My daughter Clara was my rock in those first bleak months. At 38, she was a carbon copy of her father, thoughtful, kind, with a quiet intelligence that saw straight to the heart of things. She was a social worker, fiercely dedicated and perpetually overworked. She lived in a small apartment across town and visited me every Sunday without fail, her presence a balm to my lonely heart. 6 months after Henry's passing, I began to see a light return to her eyes. It started with a name, Liam. Liam, a charismatic nonprofit director she'd met at a fundraiser. Liam, who was so charming, so supportive of her work. Liam, who made her feel cherished after a long, lonely stretch following a difficult breakup. "He's different, Mom," she said one Sunday, her face animated in a way I hadn't seen in years. "He's not like anyone I've ever met. He listens. He cares about making a difference." I wanted to be happy for her. God knows she deserved a sliver of joy. But a cold finger of unease traced its way down my spine. It was all moving so fast. The awe in her voice, the speed with which this man had become the center of her universe, felt less like a whirlwind romance and more like a strategic takeover. The first time I met Liam, he arrived bearing an extravagant bouquet of peonies and a bottle of wine that I knew, from a rare splurge with Henry years ago, cost over $200. He was handsome, impeccably dressed in a soft cashmere sweater, and his smile was a brilliant, practiced thing. "Mrs. Matthews," he said, taking my hand in both of his. "Clara has told me so much about you. It's an honor. This house, it has such character." His eyes, however, weren't looking at me. They were scanning the room, flicking over the worn but quality oriental rug, the solid, old furniture, the small, original oil painting by a local Utah artist that Henry had bought me for our 20th anniversary. His gaze wasn't admiring. It was appraising. "Liam was just telling me about his latest project," Clara said, beaming. "He's securing funding for a new community center in the Glendale neighborhood." "A passion project," Liam said modestly, his eyes finally meeting mine. "Trying to give back, you know? It's a struggle, though. Funding is always the battle. Not everyone understands the importance of investing in the community." He took a sip of his wine. "Clara tells me your husband was a professor. A noble profession? It must have provided a comfortable life." The comment was slick, almost invisible. But I heard the hook. "It provided a life we loved," I said evenly. "That's the only comfort that matters." His smile tightened for a fraction of a second. Later, after a dinner where he dominated the conversation with stories of his connections and minor triumphs, Clara went to the kitchen to make coffee. Liam leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "You know, Mrs. Matthews, I worry about Clara. The work she does is so emotionally draining, and the pay, well, it's a crime. A woman of her caliber shouldn't have to worry about her financial future." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "You must feel so relieved to be secure in your own home, no mortgage. Not many widows have that peace." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. I set my teacup down with a quiet click. "Security, Liam, is a state of mind, not a state of finance." The mask of charm didn't slip, but it froze solid. "Of course," he said, leaning back as Clara returned. That night, after they left, I couldn't shake the feeling of violation. I called my oldest friend, Beatrice, a woman who had known Henry and me since we were all newlyweds. "The man's a shark, Ellie," she said bluntly. "He's casing the joint and Clara's his key. You keep that fortune locked up tighter than Fort Knox, your gut is screaming for a reason." And it was. A deep primal dread was taking root. Liam wasn't just a charming man. He was a predator, and he had my daughter in his sights. 3 months later, Clara stood in my kitchen, her hand outstretched, a solitaire diamond glittering on her finger. It was large, flawless, and utterly out of place on her practical, unadorned hand. "We're engaged, Mom," she said, her eyes shining with tears of joy. My heart plummeted to the soles of my shoes. It took every ounce of my strength to wrap her in a hug, to murmur congratulations. "It was so romantic," Liam said, his arm possessively around her waist. "I proposed at the summit of Blood's Peak at sunrise. It just felt destined. The word felt like a sentence." Over the next few weeks, the changes in Clara were subtle but chilling. The beat-up Toyota Corolla she'd driven for a decade was suddenly unreliable. Liam, with his expert knowledge, helped her lease a new Lexus SUV. Her simple, functional wardrobe began to be supplemented with designer pieces. "Liam says it's important to look the part if we want to attract big donors," she explained. A faint unease in her own voice. When they came for Sunday dinner, Liam's conversations were increasingly laced with financial advice. "You really should let me look at your portfolio. "Mrs. Matthews," he said, carving the roast chicken I'd prepared. "A friend of mine is a top financial advisor. With your age, it's crucial to have your assets working for you, not just sitting in some low-yield account. Inflation is a silent thief." "My needs are simple, Liam," I said. "Henry left things in good order." "But for Clara's inheritance," he pressed, his tone dripping with false concern. "We need to think about generational wealth. We're planning a spring wedding at the Silver Creek Lodge. It's the perfect venue to host our network. An investment in our future, really." The Silver Creek Lodge. I'd read about it in a society magazine. A weekend wedding there could easily cost $100,000. Clara, who had always said she wanted a small ceremony in a friend's backyard, looked down at her plate, her cheeks flushed. The wedding planning became a masterclass in avarice. The guest list ballooned to include Liam's vast circle of essential contacts. The invitations were engraved on heavy gilded cardstock. Ava, the wedding planner Liam had insisted on, presented me with a spreadsheet that made my blood run cold. "The total comes to just under $90,000, Liam said, as if discussing the price of a gallon of milk. "We were hoping you could cover the majority. As a gift to your only daughter." I looked at Clara. She couldn't meet my eyes. "I can give you $15,000, I said, my voice calm but firm. "It's a significant sum, and I trust you'll use it to celebrate what's truly important, your love for each other." Liam's smile was icy. "Only 15? Clara led me to believe. Well, never mind. I'm sure we can find the funds elsewhere." The threat in his voice was palpable. The wedding day was a spectacular, soulless production. The Silver Creek Lodge was dripping with white orchids and crystal. Clara looked beautiful, but fragile, like a porcelain doll placed on a stage. As she walked down the aisle, she didn't look at Liam. She looked at the crowd, her expression one of bewildered stage fright. During his vows, Liam's voice boomed with theatrical emotion. "With this ring I thee wed," he said, sliding a thick platinum band onto her finger. "And I pledge to build with you a legacy of success and influence that will honor our families." I felt nauseous. He wasn't marrying my daughter. He was acquiring a subsidiary. 5 days after the wedding, I was in my vegetable garden when a pearl gray BMW sedan purred into my driveway. Liam stepped out, accompanied by a severe-looking woman in a pinstriped suit, carrying a sleek leather attaché case. "Ellie," Liam said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "This is Meredith Thorne, my attorney. We need to discuss the family's financial future." In my living room, under the gaze of Henry's photograph, Meredith Thorne got straight to the point. "Mrs. Matthews, we have reason to believe the estate of the late Henry Matthews is significantly larger than you may have been led to believe. We're talking in the range of $50 million. The air crackled. "And what business is that of yours?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "It's the business of your daughter," Liam cut in, his faux charm gone, replaced by a cold, hard edge. "As her husband, her financial security is my concern. Hiding assets, especially from a family member, could be construed as financial elder abuse, or at the very least it gives us grounds to petition the court for a conservatorship. We feel a transfer of $10 million into a shared investment account for Clara and myself is a reasonable starting point, along with the title to this house, which has considerable equity." I stood up, my entire body trembling with a fury so pure it felt like clarity. "You are threatening me in my own home days after marrying my daughter." "I'm protecting what is rightfully Clara's," Liam snapped. "You can either share the wealth like a family or we'll take it. Your choice." "Get out," I said, my voice low and steady. As they left, Liam turned at the door. "Think it over, Ellie. Is your secret worth losing your daughter forever?" The moment the door closed, I collapsed into Henry's chair, the scent of him a ghostly comfort. This was no longer about greed. It was a declaration of war. I picked up the phone and called Grace Lambert. "Grace," I said, my voice shaking not with fear but with rage. "It's time. The wolf is at the door." The next morning, Clara appeared on my doorstep. She was still in her pajamas, her face swollen from crying. "Mom," she sobbed, falling into my arms. He's different." The moment we got back from the honeymoon, he started demanding I talk to you about money. He had documents, Mom. Copies of old investment letters from Dad's study. How did he get those? My blood ran cold. What documents, sweetheart? She led me to his study, our old guest room he'd commandeered. In a locked drawer, which she'd found the key for tucked inside one of his books, was a file.